Okay. Anyhow, this is the average price per farm. On the left is there's 50 states. These are the 9 states with the lowest property taxes. And on the right is the 9 states, the highest property taxes on farmland. Some of them might, like New Hampshire has high property taxes, but it's, you know, farmers get a better deal. A lot of states give farmers a special deal. And what happens with that special deal is, instead of helping the person who wants to buy a farm, it helps the person who wants to sell a farm. Because you charge more when you can tell the buyer that the property tax is low. That gets capitalized, it's called capitalized into the price. So these farms over here would pay a lot of property tax or land value tax. This farm pays less, so I, as a person who owns this farm, I'm going to charge more to sell it. So there's no real advantage to the next farmer that the property tax on his farm is low. The advantage is to the person selling, and the farmer buys it and pays just as much. And you can see that in this is the sales in Delaware. He pays 80%. He pays for every dollar he paid in farmland, he sells 80% worth of crops in 1 year. So it's very good for him. Now, the problem is that's not profit. That's just gross sales. So in the states with the high taxes, and again, New Hampshire seems to be an exception, but in general, the states with the high taxes bring in revenue more quickly than the states with the low taxes. And part of it's not that they're selling a lot more crops. A lot of it is they paid less for the land in the first place. This is the sales compared to the price of the farm. So if the price of the farm is low, those figures are taller, even if you didn't sell any more crops. But wherever there's a high tax on land value, you can pay off the farm more quickly because you didn't have to pay as much for it. This one is just one of the things that we talk about is the effect on the customer of the farmer. People have been telling me that Swedish farmers are concerned about cheap food coming in from the warmer parts of Europe, and that they have difficulty competing with food from Germany and the Netherlands and France or wherever. And I asked, well, who buys the imported food and who buys the local food? And people who are better off want organic food and want high quality food and want fresh food. And you could grow organic food just about anywhere, but it's not going to get here fresh. So the Swedish farmer is better off if his customers can afford organic food and fresh food, because they will buy that from the Swedish farmer. And the people who buy, who are concerned with price more than they're concerned with quality, are going to buy the imported food. Now in America, this is a Walmart where that little red dot is. In America, the cheap food is, Walmart is like the symbol of we sell things cheap and we pay our labor very little. And they're always located at these major highway interchanges. And you can see there's big parking areas. So shopping malls in general, it's not just Walmart, but shopping malls in general take up a lot of land because they require a lot of parking. But the stores, we call them big box stores. they take up even more land and they have even more parking because it takes longer to shop there because they have very few employees to help you. And so they don't pay any taxes on labor because the customer does the labor. The customer has to find it, and the customer has to pull it down off a shelf and put it in the cart. And then and when the customer is all done, he goes up to the front and he actually has to scan his own products and pay for them. Where in a smaller supermarket or even a neighborhood grocer, there's lots of people to help you, and you go in and you get in there, you're quick, and you get out quickly. So you don't need as much time in there, which means you don't take up a parking space for as long. So the neighborhood stores have less parking because the customers are not in there, but also a lot of the neighborhood stores have customers who walk to the stores. So when you have a land value tax, it favors the small neighborhood businesses over the giant supermarkets. But the other thing that favors them is that the land near, when you build these highway interchanges, the land near those interchanges is very expensive land. And Walmart makes a science of buying the land before the highway is built. As soon as they find out a new highway is going to be built, they buy the land ahead of time, and then they make a lot of money because the land value goes up, and they didn't have to pay that. So here, if you have a land value tax, the neighborhood store is in a community. It's not real expensive. It has a small piece of land. They're competing with these big box stores that have a lot of parking and a lot of land, and they are in these expensive locations. Now, the thing that would help the small business even more, if it's a neighborhood where people walk, is if you shifted to a tax on gasoline, then people wouldn't want to drive to these things. These stores are only possible if people will drive, from a radius of 10 miles around the store, and they all drive to the store to shop. That's the only way they can get enough business to have low prices. So when you make the price of gasoline higher, which is another type of land value tax, you give the advantage to that small grocer. Now, not only do richer customers buy organic, but small grocers are better able to sell organic, and small grocers are better able to sell fresh. So this Walmart store is in Pennsylvania, eastern part of the United States, and most of their food comes from California and Florida and Arizona, where a lot of the small grocers buy food from Pennsylvania. So even if the effect on the farmer, the direct effect on the farmer is that some farmers pay more, the effect on his customers is his retail customers, if the taxes on the average homeowner is lower and the rents come down on renters, and I can explain that. But if that happens and they can afford more, they're going to buy higher quality. But the other thing is the stores that would like to sell organic produce are more likely to benefit from a land value tax. The myth is that Walmart is more efficient, that these big stores are more efficient, but they are only more labor efficient. They are less land efficient. So when the taxes are on labor, you give a profit to the people who are labor efficient, who hire as few people as possible. If that Walmart store disappeared, people would still buy the same food and clothing and TVs. And Walmart sells everything. But they would buy those things from small businesses, and the small businesses would employ more people. But the large business takes up more land. So that's the general effect on other businesses that indirectly helps the local farmer. And I think that's about it. Oh, yeah. the owner-occupied farm versus the absentee-owned farm. The absentee-owned farm has more labor because it has managers and the employees get paid by the hour, and they don't care as much. The employees come through and they say, we're paying you, maybe they get paid by the hour, maybe you get paid by the bushel. You know, it's time, come pick our tomatoes, fill this bushel, and for every bushel you get $2 or whatever, and they come and they pick the tomatoes as fast as they can, and any tomato that won't be totally rejected, they grab it. Where the farmer owner who's picking his own tomatoes, or his children are picking his tomatoes or whatever, they carefully pick the tomato at the perfect time, so that it goes from the tomato from the farm to the grocer, and from the grocer to your table, and they know that it's the perfect time for it to be right at your table, and they don't pick it any sooner. And so you get a higher quality of labor from an owner-occupied farm. The organic farm is more work. I mean, the thing about pesticides is that they don't require. You can just spray it with pesticides and leave it alone, and come back and it'll be growing. The organic farm tends to put, organic farmers do things like they put the garlic next to things that bugs don't like garlic, and they like other things, but the odor of the garlic repels the bugs. So they do this careful mixing of crops. And if you have like acres and acres of tomatoes, and you get tomato worms, and the tomato worms, when they fall off of one tomato, whatever direction they go, they're going to hit another tomato. That increases your need to do pest control. But if the tomato is next to something that the tomato worm doesn't eat, and it's going to be a while for him to find another tomato, you're much better off. We have full-time farms and part-time farms. If the part-time farm is small enough, then the owner of the part-time farm can save money under land value tax. But in the United States, we have what we call hobby farms, because we have rich people. That's part of why New Hampshire didn't do so well on those things, is it's close to New York City and Boston. And we have stockbrokers and doctors and lawyers who make tons of money, and they say, well, what should I do with my money? I think I'll buy a farm, and it'll go up in value. And in the meantime, I can go up there on weekends and play like I'm a farmer, and maybe I'll hire somebody to watch it in the meantime. And hobby farms don't do so well under land value tax. But if you get a very small farm, the work it needs to be done, you can do on a weekend, or you go up there every evening or something, then that farm would work out. And vegetable farms do better than grain and meat farms because grain takes a lot of space. Grain doesn't bring much value, but it isn't much work either. So the grain farms have very little labor, lots of land. And the last is the livestock factory farms. This is a pig farm. And the first thing is that if you have land tax everywhere, this looks like it's not using much space. It's really to save labor, because when you have pigs running free, you have to tend to them and make sure they don't get into other people's gardens. And I mean, pigs are very clean animals. These pigs are covered in their own feces, and somebody comes in once a day or twice a day and just hoses them down. And because they're being hosed down all the time, they have a discharge problem. It's discharging into a big area that's set aside, but they all leak, and it eventually gets into the water. So remember, we said you could tax pollution. If you don't like this kind of farm existing, a pollution tax is the best way to get rid of it. Because if your neighborhood goes to a land value tax, and the guy's buying his grain somewhere else, so the grain place isn't paying a land value tax, then the pig farm is actually more profitable. But if you also charge a serious pollution tax on people who do this, or you outlaw it entirely, then you don't get this problem so much. And that's only pollution because they're hosing it down and letting it go into a lake that they made. For a pig farmer that doesn't farm this way, it's not pollution, it's fertilizer. And the pigs are left to roam a field, and after a year or two of the pigs roaming that field, you move the pigs to another field and you plant a crop there. And that's the way it's always done. The crop rotation was always livestock can refertilize and re-enrich the soil in an area. So that's basically, I mean, the way to deal with the factory farms is really to charge for the pollution they create. And I think that's about it. I just left this in, and I will see what you guys have to say first. This is about land trust, and there's not many frames there, but that's the name of the land trust, is Arden, Delaware. And it says, "You are welcome hither." It's, this particular land trust has no defining things other than they collect the rent and let people, you lease the land and build a house. So anyhow, that's the basics, and I figured it's better to answer questions than to try to go into details. So do any of you have questions?
Land trust, I don't know what land trust is.
Oh, okay.
Could be Swedish.
A land trust is when one person buys a piece of land and leases out parcels on the land. So instead of buying a piece of land, you lease the piece of land. But the reason it's a trust is that the ownership of that land is no longer just with that person. It's like if you get what we call mortgages. If you get a loan to build a house or to buy a house, you can't sell that house because the mortgage company has what they call a lien on the house. So if you go to sell your house, your deed at the county, it shows that there's a lien on it, and you can't sell it until the bank approves you're selling it, or until you pay them off. Well, in a land trust, the leaseholders have a lien on the owner, so the person who owns the whole trust can't sell it. He can only lease it, and they can agree together to sell it, but he can't sell it out from under his leaseholders. And that's what makes it a trust. Then the trust would have a charter, like a constitution, and the charter would say how much of the rent the landowner gets. So when he leases it out, he's agreeing in perpetuity that he will only get maybe 20% or 25% of the rent for himself. And the rest of the rent is controlled by the leaseholders and the residents. And they get together and they agree how much money to spend improving the private roads, or how much to spend rebating your property tax on your buildings, or if you have payroll taxes, how much to rebate payroll taxes, up to the limit of what it is. And usually in the trust that I have in mind, the taxes that actually fall on the land come out first, and then the remainder is divvied up according to the trust constitution.
Vi kan väl gå över till svenska ordet.